Well, our series of conversations with finalists for the Emerging Filmmakers selection continue. Today, I'm joined by Sarah Ghassali. She's a Swinburne University student and she directed La Tansouna, Don't Forget Us, which she co-wrote with Gaia Mitting. The film stars Mark Anton as Noor. He's a refugee seeking asylum and he's detained in Australia for more than 7 years. It's an incredibly moving piece and it's beautifully told. Sarah joins me now. Sarah, welcome to you.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome and congratulations on this piece. I can imagine it would have been a very personal piece for you.
Thank you. Yeah, it was definitely was, and I'm so glad to see how far it's come.
Did you, because I know that you first started, you had the idea of this during the pandemic. Did you find that going through that, the lockdown and that sense of isolation affected how you told the story?
I think so. I think being forced to sit down really solidified what sort of stories I had been wanting to tell, and really gave me time to think about the messages that I wanted to send out through my artwork. Um, and yeah, this film, it's been something I was thinking about way before I even knew that we could pitch something like that in a university setting. So it's taken lots of different shapes and forms, but the main message was there, and it was to tell a story about something very real and very horrid that is happening right now. So I yeah, I guess being in isolation definitely helped bring out those real stories that I had been thinking about but never really had time to actualize.
Did you feel a sense of pressure in terms of how you told those stories and telling them in a way that represented refugees and asylum seekers?
Definitely. I think being an artist in such a public sphere like filmmaking, whatever stories you tell, you have like kind of a duty of care to tell them authentically. It's something I really believe in. And, you know, the story stems a lot from Mark's experience. It stems from my own experience, my family's experience, but also, you know, before this, my sister and I hosted a podcast called Refugees on Air. And we were very young, but we knew that there was something missing within the sphere of the media. And we wanted to really tell those stories that hadn't been told previously, which were the stories of people being stuck in detention and facing really um, inhumane circumstances. And I definitely felt the pressure to be really authentic and to be really um, honest, and also treat it with care and sensitivity, because this is, you know, someone's story. It's a family story, but it's also separated from that too. So I definitely felt that pressure, but I think it was really positive to listen to it, because um, that means you're making something worthwhile.
You mentioned before that you felt that there was a bit of a gap in terms of media coverage of this issue. And there's such a difference, I think, between your film and ways that we've seen this depicted before. What do you think that that main difference would be in your eyes?
I think, you know, I know film makes people feel different ways, and sometimes news reports and reading things, you know, it doesn't really impact people in the same way. And I wanted to make something accessible, especially to young people, because I know a lot of my friends had cared about, you know, human rights and people, you know, and migrants, but they didn't really know how far deep the issues were, and they weren't really presented with that information, and it wasn't accessible to them. So it was something that I definitely wanted to make, to allow people to learn in not a way to guilt them and be like, you should have known about this long time ago, and in not a way that they can't watch it and are just too like upset and, you know, it's inaccessible for them. I just wanted to kind of find that balance of, you know, this is a story, it's real. I know it's like kind of in the fictional category, but it's not really. And have it be something they can digest and hopefully take away more information and advocacy from.
I actually found, just off the back of what you were saying, that I found one of the most powerful aspects of the film what you didn't see. in Noah's story, and I get a sense that that was deliberate.
Yeah, 100%. It was just kind of like, hearing his singular voice and just seeing those, all those moments that he wish he had, and also those moments like, you know, they're what kind of the Australian community thinks what those moments would be. It's, getting your citizenship or like playing cricket on the beach, and it's such a kind of generalized outlook, that wasn't the case for me, to be honest, wasn't the case for Mark, but it could have been the case, should, given the ending of the film. But yeah, definitely, like everything in there is like deliberate and very thought through.
Absolutely. You've said in in the one of the first things that Noah says when he's arriving, he says, "In one day I was transformed from my mother's favorite child into a stranger stranded in a country far from home." And that to me was such an extraordinary statement, because it really highlighted that change in identity, that loss of identity, and even just in the way that other people perceive him. Was that something that you did deliberately?
Yeah, I think, when I was writing this film, I was also going through a lot of kind of things in my own life, trying to figure out my identity, trying to figure out, where this kind of the different sects of my identity and how they intersect together, and how migration has impacted that. And I really wanted to kind of put something in there about, for me personally, it might not be the case for everyone, but, kind of losing touch of who you are, how you kind of, um, like, how do you even, like, what do you tell people when they ask you, like, where do you come from? Or like, where do you really come from? Or things like that, like kind of interrogating that question. Um, and also talking about just how quick things can happen, like how quickly things can shift. I take that from, my own personal experience, and how much of a blur looking back at those memories can be, because of, how traumatizing they are, like, essentially. So definitely deliberate, and definitely something kind of very surface level introduction to something that migrants, or at least my family and myself, have experienced.
Where does that sit with you now, Sarah, if you don't mind me asking, in terms of your own identity and what you have experienced and where you've been through? How does that sit for you now? Because it must have been a really long process, and something that I'm sure is still going.
Definitely, I think it's like, I don't think it ever ends. And I think as I grow older, I just see the different ways migration impacts all the ways in my life. Like, it's not even just like about language, or, or education, or, this sense of community. It can even be down to things like inaccessibility to like medical history, because that's gone, when we leave as well.
Mhm.
It's and I guess that's where filmmaking really comes in for me. It's kind of this, it sounds cringe, but it's almost like this form of healing, these these gaps that have been forced upon us by migration, and just trying to find, weave these stories together to be able to tell a story that doesn't have any gaps. So um, that's kind of why I use my art this way, and I find it really healing, not just for myself, but for my community as well.
Is that where you see yourself and your niche moving forward? Because this is obviously something that you're not just that you're passionate about, but that is such a huge part of you. And the film itself has done so well, but I get a sense that that's not the most important part of it. That is such a personal piece, and a piece that's representing stories of other people, which I get the sense is the most important part for you. Is this the niche that you see yourself in moving forward for your art?
Definitely. I think I'm working on my graduation film at the moment, and that's kind of, it's also in Arabic, but it's just completely different. But the ways in which I make films is really community centered, and it's grounded in those community ties, and um, allowing people to reconnect through, language barriers and genre barriers and things like that. And I think I'm thinking of writing my thesis on this next year, on, like, where does community filmmaking lie in a colony, and why is it so important for migrants more so than other people, and why do we lean towards it, and things like that. So definitely a niche, but also I love kind of breaking out of that, because I think it's important for, you know, migrant or Arab filmmakers in general to tell those stories that people expect you to tell, like La Tansouna, and, you know, be really proud of them, but also to be able to break out of that kind of box that this industry has put a lot of us in, and be able to make things just for the sake of making them and for liking them, and we don't have to have a personal connection with them as well. It can just be something fun that we're proud of as well, which is I work a lot on music videos, and I love music, so that is a big part of it as well. Don't really feel much of like a personal connection to all of them. You know, I love the artists and the music, but um, and sometimes that can be a perfect balance to really telling those personal stories that you have so much vested interest in, as well as, you know, things that you also have an interest in, but they might not relate and reflect your identity as much.
Do you think that the way that you tell these stories will change as these communities change and flourish as well?
Yeah, I mean, I hope that there becomes less of a pressure to tell certain stories in certain ways. And I think the only way to make that happen is for people to kind of break that stereotype, and really, especially in a university setting, to be able to tell so many different um, genres and stories in so many different languages in many different ways. So I'd like to see it change, and I think I'm part of that change, and hopefully whoever comes after me will be part of that too.
One thing that really stood out to me, Sarah, was Nua's sense of having no say over his life, and that it's a life that really doesn't belong to him. And I'm sure that this is something that you wanted to say, that most people take that for granted. What do you think? What do you think defines a life that is your own, a life that you have say over? What does that look like?
For me, um,
Or for anyone?
I think, yeah, I think I'm living it. I think it's taking that life that you didn't really have a say over, and just living it. I think that's it for me. And what that looks like is kind of continuing to make and tell different stories, and to work with people, and to collaborate, and just and yeah, and just kind of really make space for people who haven't been able to live that life yet, because it's been so changed out of their hands. So I think for me, I'm so grateful to be living here, and to be going to uni, and be able to tell these stories. That I think that's what I need to continue to do. And it's brought so much happiness and reconnection to my family, especially when you're so separated, but you can have something to talk about, you know, like this idea that brings us all together. That has, you know, like a lot of my family's in Sweden, has migrated to Sweden, and I went there the middle of this year, and it was just so wonderful to be able to kind of to see how much this film had bridged so many like communication barriers and gaps and generational gaps between us, by being like, oh, you made this film, I watched it, we can have a conversation about it, regardless of, you know, so many of the traumatic things that have happened to our family, and all this separation. So I've seen it happen, you know, and I want to continue doing that.
The film has been wonderfully received. I was reading before that it has picked up, it's been to 6 different countries. It's also screening on SBS. It's been selected for film festivals all over the world. Women's International Film Festivals, Arab Women in the Arts, the Australian Independent Film Festival, the North Bellarine Film Festival. Does this give you a lot of hope that what you have to say, and that these narratives are being not just delivered, but actually really understood by lots of different people and communities?
Yeah, It's definitely it's hard to battle the imposter syndrome when it comes to things like this, but it's a work in progress. But I think it was a risk telling this film, especially in like a bureaucratic setting like a university, but
Mhm.
seeing it kind of be, yeah, not just delivered but understood, as you said, has been really kind and really encouraging, especially going into, pitching more and more stories in Arabic and working as, an Arabic filmmaker in Australia. And what does that look like and what does that mean?
Mm.
Um, and so, yeah, so it's just, it's been really encouraging. Not just for me, but kind of in showing everyone that these stories have a place. And especially, doesn't matter if you're still at uni or something like that, you can still kind of gather a really great group of people and have support and be able to take something further than you thought might be reachable.
Well, Sarah, congratulations again. I wish that we had more time to talk about it. Actually, I'd love to talk to you more about this in future. The film is La Tansouna. Don't forget us. You can learn more about it by visiting facebook.com/La Tansouna. And if you would like to see Sarah's film, don't forget you can get your ticket to the Emerging Filmmaker Awards session where all the finalist films shall be screened, including this one. Saturday, November 18, you can view the full program at northbellarineFilmFestival.org. And if you would like to learn more about how you can help refugees and people seeking asylum, you can visit Rise Refugee. It's one of the first of its kind in Australia, as it's refugee run, refugeerise.org. Sarah, why is it important for these stories to be told by refugees?
Oh, because we're the only ones really with credibility and authenticity to tell them. And I think it's pretty unethical for it to come from someone else. So, and that fits the same with in all intersectional identities.
Okay, so refugeerise.org. You can learn more about their projects and campaigns and how you can support them. They're on Facebook and Instagram too. Sarah, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you so much, Jessie.